Welcome back, everybody. It's Fundraisers Friday on the Nonprofit Show. Yay! I just felt like the Target lady there for a minute when I did that. Kristen Wick. Okay, she grew up in Arizona, in Mesa, Arizona. So,
I had no idea. There you go. There's the connection.
Hello. That's why she's so talented and funny. Oh, my God. But speaking of the real thing, we got to be talking about cultivating donors for the long term. And I feel like this is such a hard concept, Tony. It's like, we live check to check. It's such a bad mentality. And it's like, we just got to get this and then we're moving on. So I'm really excited for you to help us with this so that we can be more strategic and be more thoughtful and ultimately be more successful. We're successful because we have these amazing presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, which is today, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that make such a difference in so many lives. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, joined today by Tony Beall, Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy. Okay, I was saying this to Tony in the green room, and I'm going to witness it publicly. I do believe, Tony, and I've said this, and I think sometimes you think I'm just like jerking your chain, but I really do count you as one of the best minds in the nonprofit sector in our nation. I've seen your work for 5 years and your thought leadership, and it is such a privilege to have you teaching us and helping us to understand these concepts. I am merely a facilitator on this conversation with you because you got the goods, my friend.
Well, thank you. That's super kind. I really appreciate that. And who doesn't want to hear that kind of affirmation on a Friday, right after a long week, launching into the weekend, feeling really good about my contributions to the sector. So thank you, Julia. And you said something really important in your opening comments, and that is, the nonprofit show is all about helping folks be more successful. Yeah. And so I'm just really honored to be a part of that journey with you and the nonprofit show to give folks the tools and the insight and again, just kind of the questioning that they need to have in order to really soar and be the best they can be for the communities they serve. So thank you for that.
No, I appreciate you framing this up because today is something that I think we get frustrated about it, when we're fundraising. And I'm going to back the bus up and have you start with what the heck does it mean to cultivate a donor? For those of you watching and maybe are listening, and not watching, I had this like super cool image of these two women in a garden, like a community garden, and they're showing off their tomatoes. That sounds so pornographic, but you know what I mean. They've just cultivated something that they're really proud of. And I want you to kind of set the stage because cultivation can mean a lot of things. And so help us to understand what we should be thinking about.
Sure. Well, the imagery that you use, Julia, is perfect, right? Because cultivation really is all about planting the seeds and nurturing the growth, right? That's what really cultivating donors is all about. And I'm super mindful and aware that for some folks and professional fundraisers, the idea of cultivating a donor just sounds like not good. Like it just doesn't sound like cultivating a donor doesn't sound, warm and fuzzy, which is what we think about when we think a lot about the kind of work that we do. But cultivating donors is a little different than stewardship. And I wanted us to kind of call that out also. And again, that's just in my crazy mind when I think of cultivation versus stewardship. So cultivation to me means cultivating a new donor and doing that work to get them engaged, building trust. I've been talking a lot lately about building trust versus building likability, but building trust and getting them ready to make a gift or make some type of investment in your organization. Stewardship is typically what happens after the fact. So after you have received the gift or the investment in your organization, now you're stewarding that donor with gratitude. That's what that's all about. You're stewarding them with gratitude constantly. And then you will get to a point with that existing donor where now you're going to start to once again cultivate them for the next gift or the next larger gift. So that's how I kind of see the difference
Wow.
between cultivation and stewardship.
So I got to ask this question. If you had to pick a percentage of organizations, let's go to fundraisers that understand that, I mean, I don't see a lot of organizations that actually pull those two pieces apart and think of it as two different things. I mean, do you feel like the folks that you talk to, they understand this? I mean, do you think 50% of our 1.8 million nonprofits registered in the US understand this and are taking this to heart? Or do you
What
think
a
it's
great, yeah, what a great question. I think that's a really good question. I would say very similarly, Julia, when you and I both were first introduced kind of like the cause selling cycle
Mhm.
and those 8 steps.
Yep.
When we looked at that, we both thought, wow, had I understood it this way early on, I would have been much more successful. But it doesn't mean that we weren't doing it. It's just
Okay.
now there are names for it and there are steps for it. So I
Yeah.
think when you ask the question, do most nonprofits understand this? I think most of them are doing it, are doing cultivation versus stewardship, but I don't know that they've identified or really taken the time to think about the difference between the two. I think they're actioning their donors in those two kind of separate lanes, but I don't know that they've actually defined them that way.
Yeah, I think I love the way you phrase that. I think you're right because um, it takes, I think on the side of the fundraiser, I think most fundraisers emotionally can't just ask for money.
Mhm.
They kind of have to warm up. It's like sales. Because in a sales, I don't care if you're selling, cosmetics in a department store or you're selling a car, you generally try and create some sort of connection. And it might be
Mhm.
really quick, but you're trying to create a connection so that you can
Mhm.
make that ask, if you will. And so
Mhm.
um, I loved what you said about this cultivation aspect because I think that's a great way to be thinking forward and then I don't want to say reducing the pressure, but making it like you're not just living on that check. Like, did I get the check? Did I close the deal? It kind of takes it out and makes it, I think, obviously a lot more sustainable.
Mhm.
So when we think about this, and this is one of the big things I see with board work, and we talk about identifying potential donors to cultivate. I feel like the prevalent thought is, well, just ask the rich people in your community, and it drives me nuts. It's like, ah. So how do we identify those folks that we want to cultivate? Or maybe
Well,
we do, just ask the rich folks in our neighborhood.
Well, I mean, it's a good example, right? Because when you think about, and when we say rich people, we also translate that to meaning people that have the capacity to give, right? So when we're having conversations around folks that have the capacity to give, how do we connect with them? How do we meet them? How do we introduce them to our mission? How do we build trust? So that if their passions are aligned with the work that we're doing, it's just natural for them to want to commit to making some type of contribution to the organization. And there are so many different ways to do that. And there are lots of tools available online, additional research folks can do. Even subjects and themes for the nonprofit show dive deeper into this. But there's wealth management tools, right? So those can be ways to help you identify potential donors, especially if we're talking about high net worth individuals, those individuals that at least on paper
Yeah.
seem to have the capacity to give. Doesn't mean they're going to give, but at
Right.
least the numbers and the data seem to support that they have a capacity to give. So there's the wealth management tools. But more importantly, there's the referrals. So when you talk about board participation and board contribution to the fundraising strategies of an organization, get your board talking about, who do they know, who might have a shared passion for this mission, who do you know that has not only the shared passion but the capacity to give. So referrals are really one of the strongest ways of cultivating and identifying potential donors for your organization. And then once you've identified them, you need to have some process in place where you're qualifying them. And again, that's terminology that some folks might go, ooh, qualifying them, that sounds awful. But it's really a way that helps you better just identify how you're going to invest your time, right? There's only so much time in the day. And with limited bandwidth, you need to be able to qualify these potential donors so that you know who to approach first, who to approach second, who to approach third.
So when I hear you talking this way, it almost seems to me like we should, and correct me if I'm way off base here, that we should be looking for an alignment to the mission and the passion for the mission, and then go to the capacity side. Or does it have to, is that not really the way?
Well, that's the way I prefer it. So other folks may have another opinion about that, because I think a donor is a donor is a donor. And so if you align with passion, maybe they're a $20 donor. Okay, well, maybe now we can, encourage them to donate $20 a month. Well, you start to multiply that, right? So I think, every donor is valuable in the way in which they contribute to an organization. So if you align with passion, and there are many examples of $20 gift givers to an organization that ultimately leave a legacy through their estate planning, because that tiny gift, tiny in the vision, in the greater vision, was not looked at as a tiny gift. It was still appreciated, recognized, and valued.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I think that's also far more sustainable, because I think you live and die by those big gifts. And then I think sometimes you maybe, navigate your mission a little differently, or you do something because that donor, you think they're going to like it. And yeah, I think you got to be really, really careful on that. So I think that's really important. Part of this, and I've heard you talk about this before, but we haven't spoken about this in a long time, and that's the gatekeeper issue. How does a fundraiser who's trying to build a relationship, because they might not have one, get in front of a donor? And I'm not just saying high net worth. I'm just saying somebody that's busy. What's the best way to kind of do this and get through?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting, question and challenge of, as we try to connect with these individuals, once we've again identified them on paper based on data, if that's the way in which we've been, we've identified them. Gatekeepers are really important. And so when we talk about building relationships with a donor, if there's a gatekeeper, it's equally important that you're building a relationship with the gatekeeper. Again, this is a process. So when you first, if someone has a gatekeeper, and I don't know that as many folks have gatekeepers as we saw historically.
Okay.
I think some of that has disappeared, and it's a lot easier to connect with folks one-on-one versus having to go through a gatekeeper. But keep in mind, if there is in fact a gatekeeper, they're as valuable as the donor themselves in terms of how they can support your success. So get to know them, understand their likes and their desires, so that you can figure out also how you can support them in whatever it is that they're interested in, just in life. Again, I think we do a lot of this work because we support humanity overall. And so when you're, you're connected with a gatekeeper, really get to know them. What are their passions? What are the things that they're interested in? Recognize those, celebrate them, and you'll find that they'll be one of your best champions in helping you be successful.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really smart. I think that's good advice. And I think it's also, you never know where there are other connections that they can bring to you, and make it, if something had to get switched around to make that potential donor or that donor available to you,
Right.
right?
And,
Because they're
and
going to
that's
be
and that's an optimistic. I realize a lot of times, my answers are very optimistic, like, oh yes, you'll just build a relationship with them. Well, sometimes the gatekeeper isn't going to have it.
right.
Like, like they don't care what your mission is or what you're calling about, right? They're protecting this individual, at all costs. So if you're a vet, so you have to realize there are times where you just let go and say, this isn't the right place for me to be investing, my time, and that's okay. But if you can't get through the gatekeeper and you are just like, this person, I just know this person's right. This person's going to love what we're doing. They have the capacity to give. I've got to get to them. Then, figure out where else they're demonstrating their passion. Buy a ticket to that event that they're going to attend, and go to that other event and find a way to get introduced to them through their participation in other activities.
Right. I agree. I think that's really smart. I think that's good advice anyway. I mean, I think that, cultivating, and championing your cause at community events should be part of what you do for your job. I mean, it's just part of who
Sure.
we are. Anytime we can champion our work and our cause, heck, our sector, right? I mean, I think it's really important. So I appreciate you kind of bringing that up. I want to talk about the next aspect of this, and this is something that's a little bit more, heady, but I'm very concerned, and I know you and I have talked about this on air. We've talked about this in the green room. The AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals, estimates that the average tenure of a development director is only 19 months in a job.
Mm-hmm.
And they get burnt out, they get let go, they go on to something else. And it is a devastation to our entire sector when we don't have leaders staying on in this capacity.
Sure.
So, how long does this process take when we're talking about the cultivation? What should we be thinking about so that we can level set our expectations and not get burnt out or disappointed?
I love how you led into that with this, with that particular statistic from AFP, because when we talk about kind of major gifts and the time investment in securing a major gift, you're looking at months to years.
Yeah.
So if your turnover is somewhere close to that average, you're never going to secure major gifts because there's no one there long enough to really build the relationships. And I don't know why lately I've been stuck on this word trust,
Yeah.
but building the trust. And I think part of it is truly so. I've been participating in some interviews lately because I'm interested in some new opportunities, whether full time or fractional. And in the interview, we talked about, how do you go about, how do you look at entering a new market? And I remember saying that, I'm more interested in building trust than likability. And I think that that's something that we can think about in this work. Everyone wants to be liked. I want to be liked. I don't want anyone to dislike me. But I think at the end of the day, I want to be trusted more than I want to be liked. And being trusted means that you have to say no sometimes, and no with explanation. No with an explanation. That's how you build trust. I think if you come from the space of likability, then you tend to never want to say no because you feel like people aren't going to like you if you say no. But you build trust by saying no and giving a why behind that, or a yes and giving a why behind that. So I kind of went off. I kind of went on the rails there, but
No.
I just that's kind of what I
Yeah.
think. When I think about this. when we're building these relationships and cultivating these relationships, we're building trust between this individual and the organization that we represent. And I think that's so important when you lead with, that kind of statistic, because if I'm gone in 18 months, I want that donor to trust the organization and want to continue to support the organization above and beyond their likability of me as the representative in a
Right.
fundraising capacity. So for major donors, yeah, it's like months to years. Smaller donors can be days to weeks, right? Because you're engaging them in either peer-to-peer or social media or walkathons or something, right? Some kind of mass market event. So those are just days or weeks. Mid-level, kind of weeks to months. And then corporations and foundations, anywhere from 6 months to years, building relationships with corporations and foundations. So it really varies, depending on kind of the segment of donor that we're talking about. But yeah, focus on building trust.
So let me follow up, because I love that you brought that up, because I think that's the antidote to this churn and burn through. And let's not just lay it at the development directors. I mean, we're seeing this with the C-suite. I mean, it's things are coming in and going out. We have an industry of a changing industry, aging leadership, and tremendous burnout. And that's a bad combination. But so I think there are a lot of factors to this. But I'm really fascinated by this trust issue. And I remember when I first met you, you said, we were talking about the cadence of asking a donor, and you said, you wouldn't, like, for the most part, hopefully, you wouldn't go on one date and, like, while dessert's being served, ask for their hand in marriage, right? You
Right.
kind of, you got to date, you got to learn and experience and educate on both sides. It's the give and take. But the reality, Tony, is that our boards and sometimes even our CEOs don't understand that, because they're trying to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
how do we navigate this? Do we educate our leadership and our boards as to what we're doing and how long this takes, or do we ignore it? Like, what is that? How do we communicate that this is what's going on?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. I mean, you may want to, I'm sorry, I scratched my face on. I'd never do that. I had an itch. So I think kind of the helping board members and C-suite individuals just understand the journey. So I don't know if that's kind of sitting down and kind of saying, let's talk about donor A. Like, we just got this gift from donor A. Now let's talk about what that journey consisted of to
Yeah.
get that gift. So maybe that's something that we, that needs to happen, or those kind of conversations, not just, the celebration. Yeah, let's celebrate. We got the gift. But let's talk about the journey that took place in order to get that gift or investment for the organization. I think that will lend a lot of clarity and understanding to the board of directors and the C-suite around the work that needed to take place and the development and the cultivation that needed to take place in order to secure that gift and build that trust.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying, because I think even internally within some of our organizations, programming folks will look at the development folks and be like, "Oh, you just go out to lunch every day to fancy restaurants and ask for money." Right? Do you know what I mean? They're like, "I'm doing the hard work in the trenches, and you're just going out and having a good time." I mean, we have a disconnect of what it takes to be a fundraiser.
Yeah, you've mentioned that before, and I do think that there definitely still exists leadership that doesn't fully understand. I always kind of laugh about, the reason it's called development is because it takes time. It's not called fast track fun. I mean, you are developing, and you're developing relationships, and you're developing trust. There is a reason why the word development is in the title.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that it's just been always a fascinating conversation to talk with you on Fundraisers Friday. I also think that it's, um, you said something very interesting, and that is you don't want to make it just seem like, oh, it's so easy, because it's not. It takes time. But I feel like you highlighted something today that maybe we haven't really spent enough time on, and that is sharing, as you use that word, journey, like sharing the process with the team as to what it took to get that gift.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, Tony, most people would be very surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you were to, again, tell the story, tell it in an infographic, do a PowerPoint with the different pictures and a kind of a timeline. I mean, there's a story to be told and lessons to be learned through every journey with every donor.
Yeah.
So documenting some of those and sharing what those look like. Maybe it took 20 meetings in order to secure that gift, and that might have meant 10 meetings in the evening, right, at a dinner or something. So again, when you talk about how folks don't understand maybe the level of commitment, development is not a 9 to 5 job. You're working weekends, you're working evenings, you're doing all the things that are required in order to meet new individuals and cultivate new donors and recognize and celebrate the existing ones. So I think any opportunity to share those journeys with other folks within the organization, to your point, Julia, just helps everyone better understand this type of work and what's really involved.
Do you think that it could be an antidote, and maybe that's putting too much power using that word, but do you think it could help with this retention issue that we're facing, and it could help people avoid burnout or feel like they're successful or they're moving forward, or not? Or are we just always going to be focused on that? We got the check.
Yeah, I think anything that we can do that increases empathy around the work. I think when folks feel like there's maybe empathy around the work, but also feeling relevant around the work, which often comes from empathy, then folks will want to stay and stick around and continue to contribute in an environment that values what they're doing.
Yeah. I so appreciate this, issue, in that a lot of times I'm learning from you that although we call this Fundraisers Friday and it's all about the fundraisers and how you do your job, but the reality is it's how the organization is successful. I mean, so many of the things that you talked about just today have to do with successful management, right? It's not just the fundraising part. It fits into all of this. So it's a pleasure always.
No, thanks. Yeah, well, I think it's important too because today's development folks are going to be tomorrow's C-suite individuals, and many folks move from a fundraising role to an executive director and CEO role. So understanding some of this kind of bigger picture stuff, there's my word for the day, the stuff, just helps them be better as they look at their next step in their career.
Yeah, I think that's really wise, and I agree with you. I don't think in the beginning of my career I drew that thread from fundraisers to CEOs, but boy, am I seeing it now. It is remarkable the number of development directors that move into a CEO position. I mean, at least in my community. I don't know about yours, but
that was my path. Wow. I mean, that was totally my path. I mean, I started as an event coordinator and then became a development associate, then a development director, and then an executive director.
Yeah, interesting. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's absolutely fascinating. Well, there are a lot of questions that come up with. I mean, obviously, if you've watched any of these episodes, I'm always asking Tony questions because I'm just fascinated with it. But if you have questions, drop us a note. You can email us at info@americannonprofitacademy.com. reach out to us on social media, and we'll put you in an upcoming episode, because we want to know what you're thinking, and where we can assist you with that. You know, who assists us every day are our amazing presenting sponsors, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, of course, our episodes today, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that join us day in and day out, and they really make a difference. My friend Tony Beall, Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy, thank you once again.
Thank you again. Best part of my week, Julie. It's always a pleasure to see you, and just so grateful to connect with you every Friday for Fundraisers Friday.
It's a lot of fun. Hey, everybody, as we end this busy week and we move into hopefully a restful weekend. But if you're in fund development, you know you're going to be busy this weekend. I just guarantee it. But we like to leave with this message, and it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone.